There are moments that do not invite attention, but allow it. They do not ask to be entered. They do not signal readiness. They simply remain available. At first, awareness approaches carefully, not because the moment is fragile, but because habit moves cautiously when there is no clear role. The mind looks for a way in, a place to stand, something to do. Nothing presents itself, and so attention lingers without direction. This lingering is not waiting. Waiting implies an expectation. Here there is only presence without assignment. The moment does not react to being noticed. It does not change tone. It does not open or close. It remains neutral. This neutrality removes pressure. There is no correct way to be here, no posture to adopt. Awareness settles slowly, not by choice, but by lack of alternatives. Thoughts appear, as they always do. They test the space lightly. They do not echo. They do not organize themselves. They pass through without leaving structure behind. The mind notices this and relaxes slightly. There is nothing to hold on to and nothing to avoid. Breathing continues without instruction, sometimes felt, sometimes forgotten. Neither matters. The body remains present, but not central. Sensations exist without demanding attention. They do not stack. They do not build. They come and go as needed. Time moves differently here. Not slower, not faster, less defined. Moments do not mark themselves. They do not announce passing. This absence of markers loosens the habit of tracking. There is no sense of how long or how much, just continuity. Awareness no longer scans experience. Scanning implies improvement. Here, improvement is irrelevant. Nothing feels incomplete. The mind stops checking the edges of the moment. There are no edges to verify. The space does not expand. It does not contract. It simply allows. This allowance is not active. It does not require maintenance. It holds without effort. Attention drifts slightly, then settles again. Not because it needs to, but because it has nowhere else to go. Thoughts still arise, but they feel quieter, not subdued, unclaimed. They do not seek resolution. They do not finish. They dissolve naturally. The sense of being here becomes less specific. Location loses relevance. There is no internal point of reference. Awareness exists without needing a center. This does not feel disorienting. It feels ordinary, like removing something unnecessary that had been carried for a long time. The body adjusts subtly, not in response to discomfort, just small movements. Nothing asked to be corrected. The moment does not improve when attention rests more deeply. It does not worsen when attention wanders. This teaches something without stating it. Presence is not a task. There is no achievement here. The absence of achievement brings ease. There is no fear of losing this. Nothing has been gained. The mind does not attempt to hold the experience. Holding would introduce tension. So it does nothing, and nothing changes. The moment remains exactly as it is, unimpressed by attention, unbothered by neglect. Awareness becomes less noticeable, not gone, just transparent, like glass that no longer draws attention once it stops reflecting. There is no urge to describe what is happening. Description would create distance. This moment does not need to be named. It does not want to be remembered. Memory would turn it into an object. This is not an object. It is simply time passing without insistence. The mind rests in this simplicity, not alert, not dull, just present. The sense of effort fades further. Nothing requires energy. Even attention feels optional. The moment continues without needing recognition. There is no sense of depth to explore, no layers to uncover. What is here is sufficient by not asking for more. The ordinary quality of this is what allows it to remain. Nothing claims importance. Nothing competes. Everything is equal by not being compared. The mind stops measuring itself against the moment. There is no standard to meet. This releases a quiet tension that was barely noticed before. Awareness does not lean forward. It does not retreat. It simply stays. Not because it should, but because leaving would require a reason. No reason appears. The moment does not progress. It does not resolve. It remains open-ended without feeling unfinished. For now, this is enough. After some time, movement begins to appear again. Not as a desire to leave, and not as a need to change anything, but as a quiet shifting within what is already present. Nothing invites this movement. It is not chosen. It does not arrive with intention. Attention simply begins to move. It does not move toward anything in particular. It does not move away. It drifts gently, touching experience without holding it. There is no sense of direction, no idea of progress. Movement exists without purpose. The mind notices this motion and does not interfere. It does not attempt to guide it. It does not try to improve it. Thoughts continue to arise as they always do, but they no longer arrive in sequence. They do not connect into a story. They do not gather momentum. They appear briefly, linger for a moment, and then fade. This does not feel like distraction. Distraction pulls attention away from the moment. Here, nothing pulls. Movement unfolds from within the moment itself. Nothing is left behind. Nothing is reached. The body mirrors this quietly. Small adjustments happen on their own. Not corrections, not responses, just subtle change. Breathing shifts naturally, sometimes deeper, sometimes lighter. It does not follow a pattern that needs attention. Awareness allows it without comment. Time continues to pass, but its structure softens. Moments no longer line up neatly. They overlap and dissolve. There is no urge to keep track. Nothing asks to be measured. Without measurement, movement feels lighter. Attention touches sensations briefly, then moves on. It does not linger. It does not avoid. Everything remains temporary by not being held. A gentle rhythm forms, not repetitive, not predictable, simply present. The idea of staying present loses relevance here. Presence is no longer an effort. It remains without being maintained. Movement does not disturb it. Stillness does not preserve it. Both exist together without needing distinction. The mind loosens its habit of choosing. Choosing implies preference. Preference implies comparison. Here, comparison does not arise. There is no better place for attention to be. Nothing depends on where it rests. This absence of preference removes effort. Movement becomes easy. Rest becomes easy. Attention shifts, settles briefly, then shifts again. Not because it should, but because that is how it moves. There is no correct rhythm, no ideal pace. The moment remains intact regardless of movement. Nothing here feels fragile. Even when thoughts briefly gather, the openness remains unchanged. Nothing closes. The need to stay attentive dissolves. Attention does not need to be held. It happens by itself. The sense of being the one who moves softens. Movement no longer feels personal. Experience does not revolve around a center. This does not feel like loss. It feels like relief, less responsibility, less management. The ordinary sense of self drifts in and out of focus. It does not anchor experience. There is no need to check whether this movement is correct. There is no standard to meet. Movement does not improve the moment. Stillness does not preserve it. Both are equal. The mind notices this equality and rests within it. Nothing needs to be decided. Nothing needs to be adjusted. Experience continues without instruction. Movement slows for a while, then returns. Neither feels like change. They blend into continuity. There is no sense of beginning or ending. The moment does not announce itself. It does not signal transition. Everything overlaps gently. Experience feels whole without needing coherence. Nothing needs to be understood. Understanding would narrow it, so it remains wide by not being examined. Movement becomes softer, less noticeable. Attention rests more often, not because it is settling, but because it is no longer pulled. This rest does not feel final. It is simply part of the movement. There is no urge to hold on to this. Holding would introduce effort, so nothing is held. The moment continues without asking to continue. Nothing is completed, nothing is interrupted. For now, nothing needs to change. At a certain point, without effort, the sense of being at the center begins to loosen, not disappear, not collapse, just soften. There is less feeling of standing somewhere and observing from that place, less sense of position. Awareness no longer feels anchored. It is present, but not located. This shift does not announce itself. There is no moment that marks it. It becomes noticeable only afterward, by the absence of something familiar. The usual sense of here and there loses definition. Experience is no longer arranged around a point. This does not feel disorienting. It feels natural, as if something unnecessary has been released. Attention no longer checks itself. There is no subtle monitoring, no internal question asking how things are going. That reference softens and then fades. Without it, experience feels less personal, not distant, just unclaimed. Thoughts continue to arise, but they do not arrive as messages. They do not feel addressed to anyone. They pass through the same open space as everything else. Attention does not follow them. It does not resist them. It allows them to pass. There is more room around everything. Not expansion, but absence of compression. Nothing is being held tightly. The sense of time becomes less structured. Moments do not line up. They do not form a sequence that needs tracking. Time continues, but it no longer organizes experience. The present does not sit between past and future. It stands on its own. This standing does not feel stable or unstable. Those qualities no longer apply. There is no longer a need to locate oneself within experience. Without location, nothing needs to be oriented. The body continues its quiet rhythms. They do not draw attention. They simply happen. When they are noticed briefly. When they are not, nothing changes. Awareness does not cling to sensation. It does not avoid it either. There is a gentle neutrality. The mind, accustomed to being central, relaxes further. It does not try to understand this shift. Understanding would reintroduce a center, so nothing is done. Experience continues without commentary, without framing. There is no impulse to define what this is. Definition would make it smaller. This openness does not feel vast. It feels ordinary, like something that was always present but rarely noticed. The absence of a center removes pressure. There is no position to maintain, no perspective to protect. Nothing depends on how things are perceived. This creates a quiet freedom. Not freedom to do something, but freedom from needing to. There is no movement toward meaning. Meaning is not denied. It is simply irrelevant here. Experience does not ask to be interpreted. The mind rests in this lack of demand, not because it chooses to, but because there is nothing else to do. This rest does not feel heavy. It feels light, almost transparent. Awareness becomes less noticeable. Not gone, just unobtrusive, like glass that disappears once it stops reflecting. There is no desire to stay here, and no desire to leave. Those ideas no longer apply. The moment does not feel fragile. It does not require attention to sustain it. Even when thoughts briefly cluster, the openness remains. This suggests something quietly important. Presence does not depend on focus. It does not require maintenance. This recognition does not become insight. It does not crystallize. It simply settles. The sense of time passing becomes softer still. Minutes move, but they do not register. There is no anticipation, no memory being referenced. The present does not bridge anything. It stands alone. In this standing, nothing feels unfinished. Nothing feels complete. Completion does not apply. The mind rests in this neutrality, not bored, not stimulated, just at ease. There is no attempt to prolong this, no fear of losing it. It does not feel like something that can be lost, because nothing was gained. The idea of self appears occasionally, not as a center, but as a passing reference. It does not reclaim authority. Experience does not reorganize itself around it. This makes identity feel lighter, less defining, less binding. There is no effort to sustain this, no concern about returning later. It does not feel like a place. The mind no longer searches for footing. It does not look for stability. Stability has become unnecessary. There is no depth to explore, no layers to uncover. Experience is simple by not asking to be more. The openness remains neutral, not inviting, not resistant, just present. Awareness rests without needing a place to rest from. Nothing claims importance. Nothing competes. Everything is allowed without needing acknowledgement. This allowance feels complete without being recognized as such. There is no urge to remember this, no sense that it should be carried forward. For now, experience continues without a center to return to, and nothing is missing. Without a clear signal, the moment begins to blend back into the ordinary, not because anything ends, but because nothing needs to remain distinct. Awareness does not move away from openness. Openness simply stops standing out. It becomes background, the way quiet becomes background when it is no longer being noticed. Thoughts return a little more freely now, not abruptly, not intrusively, just naturally as part of what happens. They do not interrupt anything. They do not break the moment. They arrive and settle into the same space, and the space does not change. There is no impulse to review what occurred, no need to summarize, no need to translate this into meaning. Meaning would turn it into a conclusion, and this is not a conclusion. The sense of self becomes clearer again, but not heavier, not central, just present, like another element among many. It does not reclaim authority. It does not reorganize experience around itself. It simply appears when needed and fades when not. Attention begins to move in more familiar ways. It shifts more often. It touches one thing, then another, then nothing in particular. This movement does not feel like leaving. It feels like life continuing without resistance. There is no sharp contrast between the quiet openness and the ordinary mind. They are not separate worlds. One does not cancel the other. The openness remains available even as attention becomes more active. Not as something to return to, but as something that never fully left. Nothing needs to be preserved. Preservation would imply value, and value would create pressure. This moment does not ask for value. It does not ask to be remembered. Forgetting does not undo anything. The body continues its quiet rhythms, breathing, subtle shifts, small changes that happen without instruction. They do not ask for attention. They do not demand interpretation. The ordinary does not arrive with noise. It arrives with simplicity. A thought appears. A sensation appears. A small awareness of time appears. None of these feel like a problem. None of these feel like a return to something unwanted. They are simply part of continuity. There is no need to recreate what was felt earlier. Recreation would introduce effort. Effort would introduce a goal. There is no goal here. The moment does not ask you to keep it. It does not ask you to make it last. It remains intact by not being held. The mind may notice this and try to name it. It may reach for a phrase, a label, a description. But even that impulse passes without consequence. Nothing needs to be said. The quiet that remains is subtle, not obvious, not something that stands out. It is felt only as the absence of urgency, the absence of pressure to improve the moment. This absence is not dramatic. It does not change life. It does not provide answers. It simply removes strain, the way relaxing a hand removes pressure without altering what is held. Time becomes relevant again, but not oppressive. Minutes and hours exist, but they do not demand attention. The idea of what comes next may appear. Plans may appear. Small responsibilities may return. They return as they are, without being amplified. They do not have to be resisted. They do not have to be accepted with enthusiasm. They simply exist. There is no need to declare the end of this quiet. Declaring an end would suggest that something separate happened here. Nothing separate happened. The moment was simply a period of time in which nothing needed to be forced, and that can happen again without effort, without intention, without announcement. The ordinary continues, and the quiet continues inside it, not as a separate layer, but as a softness in the background. Attention may become focused. It may become scattered. It may become tired. It may become alert. All of these are allowed. Nothing needs to be corrected. There is no right pace, no correct mood, no correct level of calm. The moment does not require calm to be complete. It does not require stillness. It does not require silence. It simply requires nothing. This is the simplest thing about it and the easiest to forget. Nothing was asked. And because nothing was asked, there is nothing to give back, no insight to carry forward, no technique to apply, no conclusion to protect, only continuity. The quiet becomes ordinary and the ordinary becomes quiet, and the difference stops mattering. Attention moves on without leaving anything behind, because nothing was taken. For now, everything continues as it is, not improved, not diminished, just continuing. After everything has settled, there is often a brief sense of quiet continuation, not a new moment, not a closing one, just what remains when nothing else asks for attention. Awareness does not need to stay here. It does not need to leave either. It moves as it moves without instruction. There is no sense of holding anything together now. Nothing requires coherence. Nothing needs to be understood. Thoughts may appear, but they feel light. They do not linger. They do not ask to be followed. They come and go, like background sounds that do not interrupt. The body continues in its own way. Breathing happens. Small movements happen. None of it needs commentary. The ordinary rhythm of being present returns fully, but without pressure. Nothing is lost in this return. Nothing is added. The quiet that was here does not disappear. It simply stops being noticeable. It blends into everything else. There is no reason to check whether anything remains. Checking would imply expectation. There is nothing to expect. The moment does not promise anything. It does not prepare you for what comes next. It allows what comes next to arrive without resistance. Attention may drift toward the outside again, toward sounds, toward thoughts of later. This drifting does not feel like departure. It feels natural. There is no sense of contrast between then and now. No feeling that something special has ended. Nothing special happened. Time continues and it does not feel rushed. The next moment does not need to be better. It does not need to be calmer. It does not need to resemble this one. It can be exactly what it is. There is no responsibility to carry anything forward, no calm to maintain, no openness to protect. Whatever remains remains on its own. The mind does not need to remember this. Remembering would turn it into a thing. This was not a thing. It was simply a period in which nothing needed to happen. And now whatever happens next is allowed to happen. The quiet does not insist on staying. It does not insist on leaving. It has no preference. Attention settles back into its usual patterns, and those patterns feel acceptable. Nothing asks to be different. For now, this is enough.